This is a work of complete fiction created solely for entertainment purposes. All characters, locations, organizations, and events are entirely fictional, and any resemblance to real persons or actual events is coincidental. Bet. He didn't even let her finish the sentence. Naomi Carter stood in the rain-soaked doorway of Adrian Cole's penthouse, her hands trembling, her voice barely above a whisper as she told him the words she had rehearsed for 3 days. "I'm pregnant." And before the second syllable had fully left her mouth, Adrian set down his glass of scotch, turned toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Seattle's glittering skyline, and said, without turning around, "Get rid of it." 3 words. No hesitation, no pause. Like she had told him the weather was bad. But if this story already has your heart pounding, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Hit that like button right now. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know how far this story is traveling. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it before this video ends, because the stories we tell here don't come with warnings. They come with consequences. Stay with me. Every part matters. The rain had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. By the time Naomi Carter stepped out of the elevator on the 43rd floor of the Harmon Tower, her coat was damp at the shoulders, and her shoes made a soft, wet sound against the marble floor of the corridor. She had taken 3 buses to get here. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. Not her mother, not her best friend Dana, not even the receptionist downstairs who had looked at her with barely concealed skepticism before calling up to confirm she was expected. She wasn't expected. She had said Adrian's name and waited, and after a pause long enough to make her stomach drop, the woman had said, "One moment," and then another voice had come on, a man she didn't recognize, who told her to come up to 43. She walked the length of the hallway with her hands folded in front of her, trying to breathe evenly. This was not how she had imagined this conversation going. She had imagined it during the bus ride over, and the night before, lying flat on her back in her 1-bedroom apartment in Beacon Hill, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that had been there since she moved in. She had imagined Adrian's face first going still, then softening. She had imagined him saying something imperfect but human. Maybe he would reach for her hand, maybe he wouldn't know what to say, and would just stand there, looking overwhelmed, and that would be enough for her to understand that he wasn't as untouchable as he pretended to be. She had not imagined this. The door to the penthouse suite was already open when she arrived. Not wide open, just ajar, the way a door gets left when someone expects you to let yourself in because they can't be bothered to come to it. Naomi pushed it open slowly. The apartment was enormous and very cold, in the way that rooms are cold when they're expensive and no one actually lives in them. There were floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, and the city below was all wet light and blurred motion. The furniture was dark leather and pale wood, architectural rather than comfortable. There was a half-finished glass of scotch on the low table near the window, and Adrian Cole was standing beside it, his back to her, his hands in the pockets of his dress slacks. He was on the phone. She could tell by the slight tilt of his head. He didn't turn around when she came in. She stood in the doorway for almost a minute before he ended the call without saying goodbye to whoever he'd been speaking to. A habit, she'd learned. He ended all his calls that way, as if the conversation was already finished before the other person knew it. He turned then and looked at her the way he sometimes looked at things, not unkindly, but assessing, like he was calculating the weight of something before deciding whether it was worth picking up. "You didn't call first," he said. "I know." She kept her voice level. "I needed to tell you something in person." He crossed the room and picked up his glass, took a slow sip. He had the particular stillness of a man who had spent years cultivating the impression that nothing surprised him. Adrian Cole was 37 years old and had built a technology investment firm from a seed fund of $2 million into a portfolio worth close to $4 billion. She had read that number in a magazine profile once, before she knew him, back when he was just a name attached to a sleek headshot and a list of companies he'd acquired or dismantled. She had not thought much about him then. He was just another version of a man Seattle seemed to manufacture in bulk. Driven, humorless about money, allergic to sentimentality. Then she had met him at a mutual friend's dinner party, and she had discovered that in private he was different, funnier, more present. He had asked her real questions that night and actually listened to the answers, which was rare enough in her experience to feel significant. They had talked until 2 in the morning on a friend's back porch, and he had texted her the next day, and that was how it had started. 8 months. That was what they'd had. 8 months of something she couldn't name cleanly. Not quite a relationship, not quite casual, hovering in that ambiguous space that men like Adrian preferred, where they could be fully present on their own terms and absent when the situation required something inconvenient. She had understood this about him and had chosen to stay anyway. That was her part in it. She wasn't pretending otherwise. But this, what she was carrying now, this was not something she had chosen alone. "Adrian," she said. He looked at her over the rim of his glass. "I'm pregnant." The room went very quiet. He set the glass down on the table slowly, with the deliberate care of someone who was using the action to give himself a moment to think. He turned toward the window. Seattle blinked and shimmered in the rain below them, indifferent. "Get rid of it," he said. No turn of the head, no shift in posture. The words came out flat and certain, the way he spoke in meetings when a decision had already been made and he was only relaying it. Naomi felt the floor shift slightly under her feet. Not physically. She was standing perfectly still. But something tilted in the room, or in her chest, a reorientation so sudden it registered as vertigo. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. He turned around then. His expression was patient in a way that was somehow worse than irritation. "Naomi, we've been honest with each other. From the beginning, I told you where I stood. I don't want children. I've never wanted children. That was never hidden from you." "I know what you said." "Then you understand this isn't something I'm in a position to—" "You're not in a position?" The phrase scraped against something raw in her chest, and suddenly she couldn't keep her voice level anymore. Adrian, that's not how this works. This isn't a position. This is a person." "It's not a person yet," he said. Still patient, still measured, like he was correcting a basic factual error. "It will be," she said. "In 7 months it will be. Then you have time to make a different decision." She stared at him. In 8 months, she had never once felt like she was talking to a wall. He had always seemed, even in his most closed-off moments, like there was something alive behind his eyes that could be reached if you knew the right angle. She was staring at him now, and she couldn't find it. "You're serious," she said. "I'm always serious." "I came here tonight because I thought—" She stopped, pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment, started again. "I didn't come here to ask your permission, Adrian. I came here because I thought you deserved to know, because I thought you were someone who would want to know." "I do know," he said, "and I'm telling you what I think is the practical response to the situation." The practical response. She said it back to him without inflection, just to hear it out loud again. He moved toward her then, not with warmth, but with the brisk efficiency of a man closing a meeting that has gone on longer than scheduled. "I'll pay for everything, whatever you need. I'll have my assistant send you the name of a clinic in the morning. Somewhere discreet, somewhere good. You won't have to manage any of the logistics." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the dinner party where they'd met, the back porch conversation, the texts, the Tuesday evenings he'd shown up at her apartment with takeout and a bottle of wine she never asked for. She thought about the morning 3 weeks ago when she'd woken up to find him already awake, standing at her kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the street below. She had lain in bed watching him without speaking, and had thought, without meaning to, this could be something real. She had been wrong, not about who he was, about what he was capable of. "I'm going to have this baby," she said. Something shifted in his face, the barest flicker of something, quickly covered. "Naomi, I'm not asking you for anything," she said. "I never came here to ask you for anything. I came because I thought you were a decent person underneath all of this." She gestured at the apartment without looking at it. "I was wrong about that. I accept that. I'll figure the rest out on my own." She turned and walked back toward the door. "This isn't a decision you should make out of emotion," he said behind her. She stopped with her hand on the doorframe. "Everything that matters is made out of emotion, Adrian." She didn't look back. "You should try it sometime." She walked out. She took the elevator down alone. The lobby smelled like wet umbrellas and expensive cologne, and the woman at the reception desk didn't look up when Naomi walked past. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, her coat pulled tight around her, and she waited for herself to fall apart. She thought she would. She could feel it pressing at the back of her throat, the kind of grief that sits in your chest like a stone and waits for the right moment to drop. But what came instead was something quieter and more durable. Not strength, she wouldn't have named it that, just the stubborn, unremarkable refusal to lay down on a wet sidewalk and give up. She had a bus to catch. She caught it. The weeks that followed were not kind. She told her mother on a Sunday morning in her parents' small house in Renton, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she barely touched. Her mother, Carol Carter, was a retired school librarian with a sharp face and careful eyes, and she listened to the whole account without interrupting, which was itself unusual enough to tell Naomi that she understood the gravity of what she was being told. When Naomi finished, Carol set down her own cup and looked at her daughter for a moment. And he just said, "Get rid of it." In those words, Carol's jaw tightened. She had raised 2 daughters mostly alone after Naomi's father left when Naomi was 11, and she had little patience for men who treated inconvenience as a category that could include children. "All right," she said, "we'll figure it out." It wasn't a declaration of joy. It wasn't exactly comfort either, but it was the thing Naomi needed most, which was someone standing next to her without flinching. Her friend Dana was less restrained. Dana Reeves had known Naomi since college and operated on a principle of expressing everything she thought at full volume and trusting the world to sort itself out. She sat across from Naomi in a coffee shop 3 days after the news and said, "I want you to give me his address." "I'm not giving you his address. I just want to have a conversation with him." "Donna?" "A strongly worded one." "No." Dana stabbed her muffin with a fork and said, "I always thought something was off with him. He never asked anyone about themselves. You know those people who ask questions but they're not actually listening? They're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can talk again. He was like that. He wasn't always like that. He was. You just liked his face." Naomi didn't argue with this. Dana wasn't entirely wrong. What she didn't tell Dana, what she didn't tell anyone, was that for the first 2 weeks she lay awake some nights and stared at the ceiling and ran the conversation in the penthouse back through her head, looking for the moment she'd misread something, looking for the version of it where she'd said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and the whole outcome could have been different. She did this even though she knew, intellectually, that she hadn't misread anything. The man had been clear. He had been impressively, devastatingly clear. She stopped running the conversation at some point around week 3, when she felt the first flicker of nausea in the morning, and it reminded her that the thing she was carrying had its own schedule, its own pace, its own disregard for the particular anxieties of the adults responsible for it. That felt, strangely, like something she could work with. She found the clinic in early spring. Eastside Community Medical Clinic sat on a corner in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, one of the older parts of the city where the storefronts had worn faces and the sidewalks were cracked in the same places they'd been cracked for 20 years. The clinic operated on a sliding scale and served mostly uninsured patients, immigrant families, elderly residents on fixed incomes, young people who couldn't afford anything else. It was understaffed and slightly chaotic in the way that genuine community institutions tend to be, operating on goodwill and donated supplies and the organized exhaustion of people who had chosen this work on purpose. Naomi had a nursing degree and 3 years of experience in a hospital setting. The clinic offered her a position as a medical assistant with a salary that was, frankly, hard to look at. She took it anyway, partly because it was close to her apartment, and partly because she had spent 3 years in a hospital and had learned that hospitals were for surviving and clinics were for living, and she wanted to work somewhere that felt like the second thing. She started in April. By June, she had memorized every patient's name. By August, she could tell from the waiting room which children were sick and which were just scared. Her daughter was born in October. She came into the world loud and inconvenient and covered in a particular shade of gray-eyed fury that made the delivery nurse laugh out loud. Naomi held her in the hospital room with her mother on one side and Dana on the other, and she looked at this person she had made, this complete, entire, specific person, and something in her chest rearranged itself permanently. She named her Lily, not after anyone in particular, just because it sounded like something that was gentle and alive at the same time, and that seemed right. The first year was the hardest, in the way that first years always are. Not because anything catastrophic happened, but because the cumulative weight of small exhaustions adds up to something enormous when you're carrying it alone. There were nights Naomi came home from the clinic so tired she sat down on the kitchen floor to take off her shoes and then couldn't quite motivate herself to stand up again. There were mornings she fed Lily and got herself dressed and made it to the bus stop and stood there in the November cold, wondering if there was a version of her life where she'd made fewer idealistic decisions. Then Lily would grab her finger or make the face she made when she was startled, eyebrows flying up, mouth open, an expression of absolute offended astonishment at the nerve of the universe. And Naomi would feel something cut through the exhaustion like a blade through fog. Not happiness exactly, something more durable than happiness. She raised Lily in the small apartment in Beacon Hill, in the company of her mother's twice-weekly visits and Dana's chaotic affection and the familiar rhythms of the clinic. She didn't date. She didn't have the energy or the interest, and the one time Dana tried to set her up, a well-meaning teacher named Marcus, who was perfectly pleasant and wrong for her in every possible way, she sat through the coffee date and came home and felt nothing except relief to be back in her apartment with her daughter. Adrian did not call. She had not expected him to. She had also, in her most honest moments, not wanted him to. Not because she had stopped feeling the particular ache of what had happened in the penthouse on that rainy night, but because she had learned to carry it in the way you carry old injuries, understanding that it would probably always be there in the background, and that background pain was manageable in a way that open wounds were not. She told Lily about her father in the way honest parents tell young children hard things, in simple, careful language, without drama and without lies. "Your dad and I made different choices," she said when Lily was old enough to ask. "He didn't want the same things I wanted. That's not your fault. It was never about you." Lily, at 3 years old, considered this with the grave intensity she brought to most things, then asked if they could have pancakes for dinner. "Yes," Naomi said, "with strawberries." "We're out of strawberries." Lily considered this. "Blueberries are okay," she decided. Naomi made blueberry pancakes and they ate them at the kitchen table with the window open, the early spring air coming in, and Naomi watched her daughter eat with the focused pleasure of a small person who found most things in life genuinely interesting, and she thought, as she had thought many times before and would think many times again, that she had made the right choice. Not the easy one, not the comfortable one, the right one. 2 years passed. The clinic had become, in that time, the steadiest thing in her life. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way reliable things are steady, which is quietly and without announcement. She knew the coffee machine's quirks, and the supply closet's disorganization, and the particular way the afternoon light came through the east-facing window in the break room around 3 o'clock. She knew which patients would be early and which would be 20 minutes late. She knew which children would cry when the needle came and which would stare at it with a stoic fascination that she recognized, with a small private smile, in her own daughter. She was at the front desk on a Tuesday morning in late March when the clinic director, a small and perpetually coffee-depleted man named Dr. Marcus Olin, called a staff meeting to announce that the clinic had received a new investment commitment from a private firm. Significant money, enough to cover the deferred maintenance on the building, expand the pediatric hours, add a part-time psychiatrist to the rotation. "Who's the investor?" one of the nurses asked. Dr. Olin smiled in the exhausted, grateful way of a man who has been worrying about something for a long time and has finally been relieved of it. "Cole Ventures," he said. "They reached out through a third-party advisory firm. We didn't seek them out. They found us. I've never heard of a firm like this taking interest in a community clinic, but they've been completely straightforward about their intentions. No strings, no naming rights, no PR conditions." He paused. "I looked them up. They're legitimate." Naomi was writing something on the clipboard in her hand. She stopped writing. The pen stayed pressed to the paper, not moving, while the rest of the meeting continued around her. Cole Ventures. She knew that name. She had never looked it up, had deliberately not looked it up, but she knew it the way you know the shape of something you've been avoiding in a dark room. She had seen it once on a piece of mail that had come to her apartment by mistake, forwarded from an old address, and she had looked at it for a long moment before putting it in the recycling bin. After the meeting, she went back to the front desk and sat down and looked at the window that faced the street. Outside, a delivery truck was double parked, and a woman was walking a large dog that had clearly just discovered something extremely interesting in the base of a nearby tree. Ordinary Tuesday morning. Nothing was different, except that it was. She thought about calling Dana. She thought about calling her mother. She didn't do either. She picked up the clipboard and went back to work because there were patients waiting and the work didn't pause for the complicated feelings of the people doing it. 2 weeks later, Adrian Cole walked through the front door of Eastside Community Medical Clinic. He came in from the street with his coat still on, slightly damp at the shoulders from the light rain outside, and he stopped just inside the door and looked around the waiting room with an expression she didn't immediately recognize. Not imperious, not calculating. Something more uncertain than that, like a man who had rehearsed something and was suddenly unsure his preparation was adequate. He saw her at the desk. She saw him at the door. Neither of them moved for a moment that lasted slightly longer than it should have. Then Lily, who had come to work with Naomi today because the daycare had a scheduled cleaning day and there was no one else available, toddled out from behind the reception desk where she had been playing with a set of plastic stacking cups. She stopped in the middle of the waiting room floor and looked up at the man in the doorway with the frank, uncomplicated curiosity of a 2-year-old who has not yet learned to find strangers alarming. Adrian's eyes dropped to the child. Naomi watched it happen. The precise moment it registered. Lily's face upturned toward him, round and open and alive with the particular combination of her mother's cheekbones and her own specific features. And then her eyes, which were gray, a very particular shade of gray, a shade that Naomi had looked at for 2 years and felt the complicated private weight of, the same shade as his. Adrian Cole went completely still. The waiting room was not quiet. There were people in chairs, a television murmuring in the corner, someone's phone ringing, the ordinary busy noise of a Tuesday morning. But Naomi experienced the next 5 seconds in the strange acoustic suspension that happens when something irrevocable occurs in a public place. Lily looked up at the man in the doorway. The man looked down at the child. And somewhere in the ordinary morning light of a community clinic on a rainy day in Seattle, the past and the present collided with each other, and everything that had been sealed shut for 2 years cracked open at once. Nobody moved first. That was the thing Naomi remembered afterward, that for a span of seconds that felt structurally wrong, like a film frame held too long, nobody in that waiting room moved at all. The television kept murmuring. Someone's phone kept ringing. A toddler in the corner kept banging a plastic toy against the leg of a chair. All of it continued, indifferent, while Adrian Cole stood in the doorway with rain on his shoulders and looked at a 2-year-old girl with his own eyes in her face. Lily, for her part, lost interest first. She turned around, picked up one of the stacking cups she'd dropped near the desk, and went back to what she'd been doing before the interruption. She was 2. She had priorities. Naomi stood up from behind the reception desk. She did it slowly, with the particular deliberateness of someone buying themselves time to decide what their face was going to do. She had imagined this moment exactly once, in the first weeks after Lily was born, and had put it away because imagining things you can't control is a specific kind of self-harm she'd learned to avoid. Now that it was actually happening, she found that none of her imagined versions had been accurate. She had expected to feel rage, or grief, or the vindictive satisfaction of watching someone confront their own choices. What she felt instead was a strange, almost clinical calm, like she was watching the scene from slightly outside herself. "Adrian," she said. Her voice came out even. He looked up from Lily. His expression had gone through several things in the past 30 seconds. She'd caught the edge of all of them. And what it had landed on now was something she couldn't categorize cleanly. Not guilt exactly. Not shock, though there had been shock. Something more complicated, more private, that he was already working to contain. Naomi. He said her name the same way he always had, not warmly, but precisely, like he was making sure the correct word was being used for the correct thing. "Can I help you with something?" she asked. The waiting room was not paying attention to them. People in medical waiting rooms were generally absorbed in their own situations and had no particular interest in the quiet drama unfolding near the front desk. Still, she kept her voice low. Adrian glanced at the room, then back at her. "I was hoping to speak with Dr. Olin. I have a meeting scheduled." "He's with a patient. You can have a seat." Naomi, there are seats available. She gestured at the chairs along the wall and sat back down at the desk and looked at her computer screen, which was displaying a patient intake form she stared at without reading. He didn't sit. She hadn't expected him to. She heard him cross the room and take the chair nearest the window, which was the chair farthest from the desk, and she didn't look up. Lily toddled back around behind the reception desk and climbed into the space between Naomi's chair and the desk leg, where she had established a kind of base camp with her stacking cups and a small stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. She settled in with the self-contained purposefulness of a child who has decided the current situation suits her and arranged her rabbit against the desk leg with precise care. "Mama," she said, "cup." "I see it, Bug." "Red cup." "That's a red cup, yes." Naomi answered her daughter and kept her eyes on the screen and was aware, with every nerve in her back, of Adrian Cole sitting 11 feet away in the chair by the window. "Doctor." Allen came out 20 minutes later, still apologizing to the patient he was walking to the door, and stopped when he saw Adrian rise from the chair. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on back." Adrian followed him down the corridor without looking at Naomi. She exhaled. Dana called at noon when Naomi was eating lunch at her desk, because she didn't trust herself to sit in the break room and think about it without her face doing something readable. "You sound weird," Dana said by way of greeting. "I'm eating." "You sound weird while eating, which is a specific kind of weird." A pause. "What happened?" Naomi looked at the door to the hallway and lowered her voice. "He came in this morning." The silence on Dana's end lasted exactly long enough to tell Naomi that Dana understood immediately who he was. "To the clinic." "He's an investor. Dr. Olin set up a meeting. I didn't know he was coming in today." "Naomi." "Don't." "Did he see her?" Naomi put down her fork. "Yes." Another silence. "And?" "And nothing. He went into a meeting. I don't know what happens next." She picked the fork back up. "Maybe nothing. Maybe he decides it's easier to just pretend he didn't see what he saw." "He saw her eyes," Dana said. "I know. There is no pretending he didn't see those eyes." "Dana, I know." She heard Dana exhale through her nose, the sound she made when she was restraining herself from saying several things simultaneously. "What do you need?" "Nothing right now. I just needed to tell someone who already knows everything so I didn't have to explain it from the beginning." "Okay." Dana's voice was quieter now, stripped of the usual performance. "Call me tonight." "I will." She hung up and finished her lunch and went back to work because there were 4 patients waiting and the work didn't pause. Adrian did not come back out through the waiting room. There was another exit through the staff corridor that connected to the side street, and Dr. Olin must have walked him out that way, because by the time Naomi's shift ended at 4:30, there was no sign he'd been there except for the chair he'd sat in, slightly pulled out from the wall. She pulled it back. She got Lily's coat and her rabbit and her stacking cups, which Lily refused to leave without, and she walked to the bus stop and they rode home together in the late afternoon gray, Lily sitting in her lap, watching the city go by with the absorbed attention she gave to anything that moved. "Dog," Lily said, pointing at the sidewalk. "That's a dog." "Big dog." "Very big." "I want a dog." "I know you do, Bug." "Big dog," Lily confirmed and turned to watch it disappear behind them, satisfied with her position on the matter. Naomi rested her chin on the top of her daughter's head and watched Seattle scroll past the bus window and let herself feel, for the length of the ride home, the full complicated weight of the day. But he called the clinic the next morning. She knew it was him before she picked up because the caller ID showed a number with a 206 area code she didn't recognize, and something in her stomach knew. "Eastside Community Medical Clinic, this is Naomi." "It's Adrian." She let a beat of silence pass, enough to make the point that she was not jumping. "I know. I want to talk to you. I'm at work. I know, I'm not calling to—" He stopped. She heard him do the thing he did when he was rearranging his approach, a particular quality of silence that she recognized from 8 months of conversations. "I'm not calling about the clinic. I'm calling because I need to ask you something." "Then ask it." "Is she mine?" The question landed the way she had known it would land eventually, not like a bomb, more like something heavy being set down on a table, a sound that was final and unavoidable. Naomi looked at the waiting room. Mrs. Garay in the third chair, reading a magazine, two kids by the toy box, the morning receptionist, Patrice, across the desk, diplomatically occupied with something on her own screen. "This isn't a conversation I'm having at my desk," Naomi said. "Then tell me when and where." "Adrian, please." The word came out differently than his other words, slightly unsteady. She noticed it. She looked at her screen. She thought about hanging up. She thought about saying, "Yes, she's yours. Now do whatever you're planning to do and leave us alone." She thought about the gray of Lily's eyes in the morning light and the gray of his eyes in the penthouse, and the fact that she had known from the first moment she looked at her daughter that this question was always waiting somewhere down the road. "Saturday," she said. "There's a coffee place on Rainier, the one with the green door. I'll be there at 9. I'll have 45 minutes. He said, "I'll be there." She hung up and went back to the intake form and did not think about Saturday until Saturday arrived, which she managed through the particular discipline of a woman who had gotten very good at not thinking about things she couldn't do anything about yet. The coffee place was a narrow, slightly battered establishment called Perch, run by a Korean-American couple who had been there since the neighborhood was different and who made a dark roast that Naomi was genuinely devoted to. She arrived first, ordered her coffee, and took the table in the back corner, the one that faced the door, because she was not going to sit with her back to the entrance and wait for him to walk in. That was not the arrangement she was interested in. Adrian arrived at 2 minutes after 9, which meant he had probably been outside for a few minutes and was managing his own version of whatever this was. He came in and spotted her immediately and crossed the room with the unhurried, measured step of a man who had been practicing looking unaffected. He sat across from her. He looked different from the waiting room. She'd had time to actually take him in now, rather than the fragmented impression of the Tuesday morning. He was wearing a gray sweater rather than a suit jacket, which was itself a signal, deliberate or not. He looked tired around the eyes in a way she didn't remember from before, or maybe she just hadn't been paying that kind of attention then. A server came. He ordered a black coffee without looking at the menu. "Well," Naomi said. "Well," he said, "you wanted to ask me something." He looked at her directly. "Is Lily my daughter?" "Yes," she said. He absorbed this without visible drama, which told her he had already known, had known since the waiting room, probably, and had needed the confirmation more for the formality of it than for the actual information. "You weren't going to tell me," he said. "No. Because you told me very clearly what you wanted. I respected that. You made a decision, and I made mine." She kept her voice without accusation because she hadn't come here to prosecute anything. She had come here to be clear. "I don't need anything from you, Adrian. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because you asked me to be, and because I thought you deserved a straight answer." He was quiet for a moment. A woman at the next table laughed at something her companion said, and the espresso machine made its noise, and outside a bus went past in the wet street. "How old is she?" he asked. 2. She'll be 3 in October." "What's she like?" The question caught Naomi slightly off guard. She had been braced for logistics, for the kind of careful transactional language he'd used in the penthouse. Not this. She considered it. "She's a lot. She pays attention to everything. She has opinions about which cup is the right cup, and she'll argue about it. She laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them." She paused. "She's stubborn." Something moved in his face. Not a smile, not quite, but an easing of something. "What does she need?" he asked. "She has what she needs." "Naomi, I'm not saying that to score a point. I'm saying it because it's true. We have a life. We have people who love her. She's healthy, and she's happy, and she knows she's wanted." She said the last word without looking away from him. He took the weight of it. "I deserve that. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to be honest with you. You asked what she needs. She needs stability and consistency and people who show up. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Those are not the things you offered when you had the chance. I know that. I know you know it. I'm saying it out loud anyway because I want to make sure we're in the same conversation. She looked at him steadily. What is it you actually want here, Adrian? Not what you think is the right thing to ask for. What do you want? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, I want to know her. Why? He looked up. Because she exists. Because I walked into that room and I saw her and He stopped. Started again. I've made a lot of decisions in my life that I felt certain about. That one, in that room with you, 2 years ago, I told myself I was being practical. I told myself it was the sensible thing. I built a whole story around it. He pressed his thumb to the edge of the table. And then I walked into a medical clinic on a Tuesday, and she looked up at me, and I didn't have a story anymore. Naomi listened to this without responding. She was not unmoved by it. She was also not naive. Remorse was a feeling. Feelings were not the same as behavior, and behavior was not the same as character, and character was not something you observed in a coffee shop. It was something you observed over time in ordinary circumstances when there was nothing convenient to be gained. I'm not going to let you hurt her, she said. That is the only non-negotiable thing I have. She's 2 years old and she doesn't know you exist, and I will not let you come into her life and leave again. If you want any kind of relationship with her, it has to be consistent. It has to be built slowly, and it has to be for her benefit, not for yours. She met his eyes. I'm not going to use her as a way to punish you, and I'm not going to use her as a way to reward you either. She's not a mechanism for anything. She's a person. I understand that. Do you? He held her gaze. I'm asking for a chance to prove it. She picked up her coffee. That's not a decision I'm making today, she said. That's not a decision I'm making this month. You don't get a timeline from me. You get the truth, which is that I'm watching. And I need a lot more than one conversation to believe that the man sitting across from me right now is different from the man who told me to get rid of my child. He didn't argue with this. He nodded once. She finished her coffee and put on her coat and told him to have Dr. Olin coordinate any future clinic matters through the administrative line. Then she walked out into the Saturday morning and called her mother. How'd it go? Carol asked. He wants to know her. Silence on the line. And I told him what I told him. Naomi stopped at the corner and waited for the light. I don't know what he does next. I guess that's where we find out what kind of man he is. Carol made a sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite skepticism. The particular sound of a woman who had been burned before and was not optimistic but was also not going to be the one to close the door. Are you all right? She asked. Naomi watched the light change. I'm fine, Mom. I'll call you later. She hung up and crossed the street and went home to her daughter. What happened next was not what she had expected. She had expected pressure. She had expected the particular kind of pressure that wealthy men applied when they decided they wanted something, measured at first, then escalating, working through lawyers or intermediaries or appeals to reason that were really just appeals to their own convenience dressed up in procedural clothing. She had half expected a letter from a legal firm within the month, something formal about paternity rights and parental access, and she had spent time preparing for it mentally, deciding how she would respond. No letter came. What came instead was small things, oblique things, things she noticed only because she was paying attention. The clinic's supply order arrived 3 weeks earlier than usual, and the shipment included several items Dr. Olin hadn't specifically requested: pediatric equipment, better quality bandages, a blood pressure monitor that didn't make the sound it had been making for 2 years. When she asked about it, Dr. Olin said only that the investor liaison had been very proactive. A family that had been coming to the clinic for 6 months, the Morales family, a grandmother raising 3 grandchildren after her daughter's accident, arrived one morning with their Medicaid paperwork inexplicably resolved. The grandmother, Celia, sat in the plastic chair across from Naomi's desk with her hands folded in her lap and said, I don't know what happened. Someone called the office. All the forms went through. Naomi said she was glad to hear it. She filed it away. 2 months after the coffee shop, on a Wednesday evening, when she and Lily were walking back from the small park 3 blocks from their apartment, she saw Adrian's car parked on the cross street, not in front of her building, 2 blocks away, idling. Not doing anything, just there. She walked past and didn't look at it, and when she turned around at the corner to check, it was gone. She thought about what she'd told him. I'm watching. It seemed he was watching too. She did not call him. She did not acknowledge what she'd seen. She went home and made dinner and put Lily to bed and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and thought about the difference between a man conducting surveillance and a man who didn't know how to ask for something he wasn't sure he had the right to ask for. She was not prepared to decide which one it was yet. What she allowed herself to register was that he hadn't pushed. He hadn't shown up at her door. He hadn't sent lawyers. He had sat across from her in a coffee shop and said, I want to know her. And when she said, not yet, he had said, I understand, and apparently had meant it, at least so far. That was not nothing. It was not enough. But it was not nothing. Spring became summer. Lily turned 3 in October with the enthusiasm of a child who had decided birthdays were a personal gift from the universe to her specifically. They had a small party in the apartment. Carol and Dana and 2 of Lily's friends from the daycare she'd started attending in September. A toddler named Mia, who was extremely serious about art projects, and another named James, who cried at everything and also found everything hilarious, sometimes simultaneously. Dana brought a cake that was slightly lopsided and had been decorated with what she described as flowers and Lily described as blobs. And Lily was enthusiastic about both the interpretation and the consumption. She's so her, Dana said afterward, when the kids were gone and Carol had left, and it was just the 2 of them washing dishes in the kitchen while Lily slept on the couch, still wearing her birthday crown. What does that mean? It means she's just exactly herself. She's not performing for anyone. She's just completely, thoroughly herself. Dana handed Naomi a rinsed plate. It's kind of incredible. Naomi dried the plate and put it in the cabinet. She's always been like that. I know, I'm saying it's a gift, she paused. She looks more like him when she's tired. Naomi didn't say anything. I'm not trying to stir anything up, Dana said. I'm just saying what I observe, because I love you both. And I'm allowed to observe things. I know you are. Has he reached out again? Not directly. Naomi told her about the supply orders, about the Morales family's paperwork, about the car on the cross street. She watched Dana process it. That's either really thoughtful or really calculated, Dana said. Or both. They're not mutually exclusive. No, Dana agreed. They're not. She was quiet for a moment. What do you think? Naomi looked through the kitchen doorway at Lily on the couch, the birthday crown tilted sideways on her head, her small face slack and peaceful in sleep. I think he's trying to figure out how to be something he has no blueprint for, she said. I think he's done it badly so far, and I think he knows it. I think he's scared to make another wrong move. She turned back to the sink. I also think that none of that means I owe him anything. No, Dana said. It doesn't. But I'm watching. Dana nodded. She didn't push further, which was one of the things Naomi had always valued in her, the ability to say the things she was thinking and then leave room for the answer, rather than filling every space with her next thought. They finished the dishes. They turned off the kitchen light and carried Lily to bed together, one holding her shoulders, one holding her legs, both moving carefully to avoid waking her. In her small bedroom, with the nightlight casting its soft circle on the wall, Lily stirred once and said without opening her eyes, Rabbit. Her rabbit was already in her arms. She was already asleep again before either of them could answer. Dana left at 10. Naomi locked the door, turned off the living room light, and stood in the hallway for a moment in the quiet apartment, listening to the sound of her daughter breathing in the next room. She thought about the version of herself from 3 years ago, standing on a wet sidewalk outside the Harmon Tower with nowhere to be except the bus stop. She thought about how far that version of herself felt from this moment, not in terms of pain, because pain didn't simply evaporate, it just changed shape, but in terms of ground covered, in terms of what had been built. She had built it, room by room, day by day, shift by shift. And whatever came next, whatever Adrian Cole was working himself toward in his careful, oblique, unannounced way, it was going to have to contend with that, with the life she had made, with the specific weight and reality of what she had built without him. It was not going to be simple. She had stopped expecting simple a long time ago. She went to bed. In the morning, there would be the clinic and the bus and Lily's opinions about breakfast, which were extensive and non-negotiable, and all of it would continue the way it had been continuing. Imperfect and exhausting and genuinely, stubbornly hers. The call came on a Thursday morning in November, 4 months after the coffee shop. And it was not from Adrian directly. It was from a woman named Helen Park, who introduced herself as the community liaison for Cole Ventures and spoke in the careful, unhurried tone of someone who had been briefed extensively on how to handle this particular conversation. She was calling, she said, because the firm was looking to expand its support of Eastside Community Medical Clinic and wanted to understand what the clinic's most pressing operational needs were: staffing, equipment, outreach programs, anything that had been underfunded or deferred. Naomi transferred the call to Dr. Olin. She sat at her desk afterward and thought about the word operational and how it was a very particular kind of word for a very particular kind of conversation. She thought about Adrian sitting somewhere in one of his glass and leather offices, deciding that operational was the correct framing, that a community liaison was the correct vehicle, that expanding clinic support was the correct angle from which to approach a woman who had told him she was watching. He was not wrong, exactly. That was the complicated part. The clinic needed the support. The families that came through the front door needed the clinic. Whatever she thought about Adrian Cole's motives, the practical result of his involvement had been better equipment, resolved paperwork, and a supply chain that no longer operated on the assumption that something would always be missing. She was not going to refuse help for patients, because the help was coming from a man she had complicated feelings about. That would be punishing the wrong people. She was watching. That was still true. But watching didn't mean standing still. December arrived with the particular Seattle combination of cold rain and premature Christmas lights that Naomi had always found slightly absurd, and also, privately, comforting. Lily had developed strong feelings about Christmas lights. Specifically, she believed that every house that had them was better than every house that didn't. And she communicated this view clearly and repeatedly on their evening walks. "That one has stars," she announced, pointing at a house 3 doors down from their building. "Those are snowflakes," Naomi said. Lily considered this. "They look like stars." "They're snowflakes. 6 points instead of 5. I want stars on our house. We're in an apartment. On our apartment." "Lily." "Just small stars," Lily said, in the tone she used when she was negotiating toward a predetermined conclusion. "Not big stars. Small ones." Naomi bought a string of small lights at the drugstore the following Saturday and hung them along the living room window, and Lily stood in front of them with an expression of absolute satisfaction that made Naomi feel momentarily like she had accomplished something genuinely significant. "Stars," Lily said. "Stars," Naomi agreed. It was the kind of moment that existed completely outside of everything else, outside Adrian and the clinic and the weight of the past 3 years and all the open questions she was carrying around. Just her daughter and a string of lights and the particular quality of winter evening light through a Seattle apartment window. She took a picture. She put it in the folder on her phone where she kept all the pictures of Lily, the one she'd been adding to since the hospital, which was now large enough that she'd had to buy more phone storage twice. She did not send the picture to anyone except her mother and Dana. Adrian showed up at the clinic again in January. This time it was not unexpected. Dr. Olin had mentioned a site visit, had mentioned it twice, and Naomi had marked the date in her head and spent the preceding week deciding how she felt about it. She had not reached a clean conclusion. She had reached something more like an uneasy truce with her own uncertainty, which would have to be enough. He arrived at 10 in the morning with Helen Park and a younger man she didn't recognize, and Dr. Olin met them at the door and walked them through the facility. Naomi was at the desk. She nodded when he walked past. He nodded back. Professional, appropriate. The kind of interaction that could have meant anything or nothing. What she noticed, and she noticed it because she was paying attention the way she'd told him she would, was where his eyes went during the tour. Not to the equipment, not to the rooms Dr. Olin was describing. They went to the waiting room, to the chairs, to the toy box in the corner. Checking, she understood, for a particular small person who was not there that day because Wednesday was a daycare day. She did not tell him that. He did not ask. After the tour, Dr. Olin brought the group into his office and closed the door, and Naomi sat at her desk and did her work and did not think about what was being said in there mostly. 40 minutes later, Adrian came back through the waiting room alone. Helen Park and the other man were still in with Dr. Olin. He stopped at the desk. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "About 2 of them," she said. He sat in the chair across from the desk, the one for patients, the plastic one with the slightly wobbly left leg. He looked strange in it, a man in a well-cut coat sitting in a waiting room chair, and she suspected he knew how he looked and had sat there anyway to make a point she'd have to decide whether to credit him for. "I'm not here to push," he said. "I just want to tell you something and then I'll go." She waited. "I've been thinking about what you said in the coffee shop, about consistency, about showing up." He pressed his hands together, not in an anxious way, but in the way of someone choosing their words carefully and using the pause to do it. "I know you don't trust me. I know I haven't given you any reason to. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking if there's something, anything, that I can do for the clinic or for families here that would be useful. Not to earn anything from you, just because it's something I can actually do." Naomi looked at him for a moment. "Why are you asking me and not Dr. Olin?" "Because Dr. Olin tells me what the clinic needs administratively. You're the one who knows what people actually need." He paused. "You've always been the person who knew what people actually needed." She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an acknowledgement of something more complicated. She let it sit. "The Alvarez family," she said finally. "They've been on the wait list for dental referrals for 8 months. The father is in pain. He can't afford a dentist, and he won't miss work to go even if he could. There's no dental provider in the network that comes to the clinic." She looked at him evenly. "That's an actual problem. If you want to do something useful, solve that one." He nodded. He took out his phone and typed something, not in a performative way. He wasn't making a show of it. He just typed it. "Anyone else?" he asked. She thought about it. She gave him 2 more names, 2 more specific situations. He typed both. He did not promise anything in the florid, unconvincing way of people who want to appear responsive. He just said, "I'll look into it," and stood up and thanked her for her time. She watched him leave. The wobbly chair sat slightly askew where he'd been. She reached over and straightened it. 3 weeks later, the Alvarez family called to let her know that a mobile dental unit had started coming to the clinic on Thursday afternoons, covered entirely by an anonymous donation to the Community Health Fund. Naomi looked at the information sheet Patrice handed her and read it twice. Mobile dental unit, Thursday afternoons. Anonymous. She put the sheet in her desk drawer and did not say anything to anyone about it. February came, and with it a cold that settled into the city like something permanent. Lily caught it first. The particular daycare cold that moved through small children the way weather moves through a coast, inevitable and unimpressed by preparation. She ran a fever for 2 days that wasn't dangerous but was high enough to make her miserable and clingy and deeply opposed to any suggestion that was not stay in bed with Mama and watch cartoons. Naomi took the days off and stayed home with her, and they camped on the couch under a blanket that Lily had claimed as her personal territory, and watched the same 3 animated films on rotation because Lily had decided those were the correct films for being sick and was not open to alternatives. On the second day, somewhere between noon and 2, Lily fell asleep against Naomi's shoulder, her breathing still slightly ragged, her small body warm and heavy. Naomi sat very still and didn't change the channel even though the film had ended and the menu screen was looping its music because she didn't want to wake her. She sat in the quiet and thought about what it would mean to let someone in. Not Adrian specifically. Or not only Adrian. She thought about it in the broader sense, the way she'd been turning it over for years. She was not a closed person. She had her mother, she had Dana, she had the colleagues at the clinic who had become something more than colleagues. She was not someone who confused being self-sufficient with being isolated. She knew the difference. But there was a particular kind of closeness she had kept at a careful distance since the penthouse 3 years ago. And it wasn't entirely about Adrian. It was about what she'd learned about her own judgment. She had trusted her reading of him and been wrong. Not wrong about who he was exactly. She hadn't fundamentally misread him. She had been wrong about what he was capable of under pressure. And that was the harder lesson, because it meant that reading people well wasn't always enough. Sometimes the test didn't come until it came, and by then it was too late to revise your position. She looked at Lily sleeping against her shoulder. She had made the decision that mattered. She had made it alone, on a wet sidewalk, with nothing but the unremarkable stubbornness she'd inherited from her mother. And Lily existed because of it. This specific person, this particular combination of personality and gray eyes and strong opinions about cups. Whatever came next, she had not been wrong about that. Adrian called her directly for the first time in mid-February. Not the clinic line. Her personal number, which he still had from 3 years ago, and which she had not changed because changing it would have felt like a gesture of fear she wasn't interested in making. She let it ring once, picked up. "What is it?" "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for the names, the families. Things are moving on those. I heard about the dental unit." A pause. "I asked them to keep it anonymous. I know who has connections to a mobile dental operation in Seattle, Adrian. It's a small city." Another pause, and she thought she heard something that might have been a reluctant exhale. "Is it helping?" "Yes, it's helping." "Good." He was quiet for a moment. "How is she?" Naomi looked across the apartment to the bedroom, where Lily had finally graduated from the couch to her own bed, and was currently audible through the door making a series of sounds that indicated she was either playing with her stuffed animals or narrating an adventure only she could see. "She had a cold this week. She's better." "I'm sorry to hear that. The cold." "She's fine. Kids get colds." "Right." He sounded for a moment like someone navigating territory they'd studied but never actually entered. "What does she... what kinds of things does she..." He stopped himself. "I'm sorry. That's too much." It was too much, but she noticed that he'd stopped himself. She filed that too. "She likes dinosaurs this month," Naomi said. "Not warmly, not as an invitation, just as information. Last month it was butterflies. The month before that it was trucks. She rotates. Dinosaurs. Specifically the ones that turned out to be wrong. She was very invested when I told her that some of the dinosaurs she'd seen in movies weren't accurate. She wanted to know which ones. She heard something on his end that she couldn't identify at first and then recognized. He was laughing. Not loudly. Quietly, the way someone laughs when something catches them off guard and they haven't decided whether to let it show. "What did you tell her?" he asked. "I told her about the feathers. She thought about it for a while and then said that feathers were actually better and the movies were wrong to leave them out." "She's right," he said. "I told her that." The conversation went quiet, not uncomfortably. Outside her window, the February rain was doing what February rain in Seattle does, which is fall with the steady, gray commitment of something that has nowhere else to be. "Adrian," she said, "I'm not ready to arrange anything formal. With Lily and you. I want you to know I'm not saying never. I'm saying not yet. And not yet is real. It's not a delay tactic." "I know," he said. "Do you?" "I do. I'm not..." He paused. "I've spent my whole life moving at a pace that suited me, deciding when things happened and on what terms. I understand that this is not mine to decide." She sat with that. "What are you doing to yourself while you wait?" she asked. It came out more directly than she'd intended, but she didn't walk it back. "What do you mean?" Are you okay? Because the waiting is real too. You're not just a situation I'm managing, you're a person in this." A longer pause this time. "That might be the first time you've said something like that to me." "Don't read too much into it." "I won't," he said. But she could hear that he had already, and she decided not to correct it. Because she was also not a person who performed coldness, she didn't entirely feel just to protect herself. She had said it because she'd meant it. That was all it was. "I'm doing okay," he said. I've been thinking about a lot of things. About the choices I made. About why I made them." He paused. "I started talking to someone. A therapist. Which is not something I've ever done, and is frankly uncomfortable." She didn't respond immediately. This was not what she'd expected. "That surprises you," he said. "Yes." It surprises me too, most of the time. He sounded neither proud of it nor ashamed of it, just matter of fact in the way someone is matter of fact about something they've decided is necessary, regardless of how they feel about it. She asks questions I don't have good answers to. I've spent a lot of years assuming I had good answers to most things. You did have good answers to most things, Naomi said. That was never the problem. I know. A pause. The problem was what I thought those answers gave me the right to do. She didn't tell him she agreed. She also didn't tell him she disagreed. She sat with it in the gray February afternoon and let it be what it was, which was someone saying a true thing out loud, imperfectly, to someone who already knew it. I have to go, she said. Lily's awake. Okay, he hesitated. Thank you for picking up. Don't thank me for that. All right, a brief pause. Good night, Naomi. Good night. She hung up and sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. Then she got up and went to Lily's room, where Lily was indeed awake and had arranged all 4 of her stuffed animals in a row on the pillow and was lecturing them about something with the focused gravity of a small person who has important information to convey. What are you telling them? Naomi asked, leaning in the doorway. Lily looked up. Dinosaurs, she said. What about them? They had feathers, Lily said seriously. The movies are wrong. Naomi sat down on the edge of the bed. You're right, she said. The movies are wrong. Lily nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose position has been confirmed and turned back to her audience of stuffed animals, resuming her lecture. March arrived and the rain softened slightly, taking on the particular quality of early Pacific Northwest spring that was not warm but was no longer actively hostile. The clinic was busy in the way it always was when the seasons shifted. Respiratory things, allergies, the uptick in children's appointments that came when daycare enrollment peaked after the new year. Naomi moved through the days with the practiced ease of someone who had learned her rhythms well, who knew where everything was and what everyone needed, and how to pace the relentless, ordinary work of keeping a place like this running. Adrian came to the clinic one more time in March, again with Helen Park, again for an administrative meeting with Dr. Olin. This time, on his way out, he stopped at the waiting room toy box and crouched down beside it. He wasn't aware she was watching. Or maybe he was. She couldn't tell. He looked at the toys for a moment, then reached into his coat pocket and placed something on top of the box. She waited until he'd left to go look. It was a small plastic triceratops. Well-made, accurately detailed, not the cheap kind that broke after 2 days. It had been positioned carefully on top of the toy box, not tucked inside where it would get lost, just set there, available. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. She thought about the phone call, about feathers, about a man sitting in a therapist's office answering questions he didn't have good answers to. She put the triceratops back on top of the toy box. That afternoon, when she picked Lily up from daycare and they walked back to the bus stop, Lily stopped in front of a pet store window and stared at the rabbits inside with solemn intensity. We're not getting a rabbit, Naomi said. We already have a stuffed one. The real one needs a home, Lily said. The real one already has a home. It's in there. Lily pressed her small hand to the window glass. The rabbit inside twitched its nose. Lily gasped as if this was the most extraordinary event she had ever witnessed. Mama, it moved. Rabbits move. It moved its nose. They do that. Lily turned to look at her with an expression of someone who has just been profoundly misunderstood. It was looking at me. Naomi looked at the rabbit. The rabbit looked at Naomi with the blank, mild expression of a creature with limited interior life and significant commercial value. Come on, Bug. Bus is in 4 minutes. Lily took one last long look at the rabbit, communicated something to it with her eyes that Naomi couldn't decode, and then turned and took her mother's hand and walked. That was the thing about Lily. She felt everything fully, and then she moved. She didn't drag. She didn't hold on past the moment. She grieved the rabbit for about 30 seconds, then asked if they could have pasta for dinner, and by the time the bus came, she was explaining to the woman sitting next to them on the bench the Triceratops was actually a very good dinosaur, even though it didn't have feathers, because it had 3 horns instead, which was also good. The woman, who was in her 70s and wearing a tremendous hat, listened to this with complete seriousness and said she'd never thought about it that way. Most people haven't, Lily said. Naomi stared straight ahead and did not let herself smile until Lily wasn't looking. So April came, and with it the thing Naomi had been not quite expecting and not quite dreading, which was that Lily began to ask about her father. Not dramatically. Not in the way it happened in films, where the question came at a charged moment and carried the weight of everything unsaid. She asked it on a Tuesday evening while Naomi was making dinner, standing at the kitchen doorway in her socks, eating a cracker. "Mia has a dad," she said. "Mia does, yes." Naomi kept her eyes on the pot. "James has a dad." "He does." "I don't have a dad," Lily said. Not accusatory, just informational, the way she cataloged things. "No," Naomi said carefully, "you have me, and Grandma, and Dana." Lily crunched her cracker. "But do I have a dad somewhere?" Naomi turned the heat down and turned around and looked at her daughter in the kitchen doorway. 3 years old, socks, cracker, the absolute unself-conscious directness of a small person who hadn't yet learned that some questions made adults uncomfortable. She had prepared for this. She had thought about it, talked to her mother about it, read things about it. She had a version of the answer ready, but looking at Lily's face, serious and open and entirely without guile, the prepared version dissolved, and what came out instead was simpler. "Yes, she said, "you have a dad. His name is Adrian. He didn't know how to be there when you were very little, but he's been learning." Lily thought about this. "Is he nice?" Naomi paused. "He's trying to be." Lily crunched the remainder of her cracker and appeared to weigh this against some internal rubric. "Can I meet him someday?" "Maybe someday," Naomi said, "when it feels right." "Okay," Lily said, and turned and walked back to the living room, apparently satisfied. Naomi stood at the stove for a moment, not moving. The pot simmered. Outside, rain tapped at the kitchen window. She picked up her phone. She found Adrian's number. She typed a message and looked at it for 30 seconds before she sent it. "She asked about you tonight. I thought you should know." She put the phone face down on the counter and went back to the pot. He replied 12 minutes later. "What did she say?" She picked up the phone. She thought about the kitchen doorway, the socks, the cracker, the complete uncomplicated directness of her daughter's inquiry. "She wanted to know if you were nice," she typed. A pause. "What did you tell her?" Naomi looked at the window. Rain on glass, the hiss of the pot, the muffled sound of Lily narrating something to her stuffed animals in the other room. "I told her you were trying to be," she typed. She put the phone down and turned off the burner and called Lily for dinner. He didn't reply again that night. He didn't need to. She had said the only true thing there was to say, and he had received it, and that was enough for now. She set the table for two. Lily came in with her rabbit under one arm, declaring that Rabbit was also hungry and required a seat. Naomi gave the rabbit a seat on the corner of the table, and Lily ate her dinner with great seriousness, occasionally offering the rabbit a descriptive account of the pasta's qualities. "It's good," Lily told the rabbit. "You would like it if you could eat." Naomi watched her daughter and felt the particular combination of exhaustion and gratitude that had become, over 3 years, the texture of her daily life. Not romantic, not clean, just real and hers, and worthy of the difficulty it had cost her. Outside, the April rain fell on Seattle, the way it always fell, thorough and unhurried, indifferent to what it was falling on, making no promises about what came after. She cleared the plates. She washed the rabbit's imaginary dish with great ceremony at Lily's request. She ran Lily's bath and listened to the ongoing drama of the rubber duck who had apparently offended the whale figurine and was in the process of apologizing. She did all of it and felt, underneath the ordinariness, the particular tension of something moving slowly toward a moment she hadn't reached yet, couldn't see clearly yet, but could feel the way you feel a change in weather, in the quality of the air, in the way the day held itself just before something shifted. She didn't know what came next. She knew she was not afraid of it. That was new. Or not new. It had been building for a long time, quietly, in the way that real things build. But she recognized it now for what it was, Standing in her bathroom doorway, listening to her daughter conduct a diplomatic negotiation between rubber animals in a bathtub. Whatever came through her door next, she would handle it. She had already proven she could. The first meeting was Naomi's idea, which mattered to her more than she could have easily explained. She had spent 2 weeks after sending that text message turning the question over in the private, methodical way she turned most hard questions. Not obsessively, but thoroughly, the way you check a structure before you trust it with weight. She talked to her mother, who said less than Naomi expected and listened more, which meant Carol thought it was the right direction and didn't want to push. She talked to Dana, who said everything she thought and then said, "But you already know what you're going to do," which was also true. She sat with Lily on a Saturday morning watching cartoons and watched her daughter eat cereal with the focused pleasure she brought to all meals, and thought about what Lily had asked. Is he nice? And about her own answer, and about what it would mean to keep giving that same answer indefinitely without ever testing it against reality. She called Adrian on a Sunday afternoon in late April. "I'm not making any promises," she said, before he could say anything. "This is not a decision. It's an introduction, 1 hour, somewhere public, somewhere she feels comfortable. If she wants to leave, we leave. If I decide it's not working, I end it. Those are the terms." "Those are completely reasonable terms," he said. "I know they are. I'm not asking your opinion on them." A pause. "I understand. There's a place called Greenwood Park, the one on the north side with the duck pond. She likes the ducks? Saturday, 10 in the morning. Come alone." "I'll be there." She hung up and sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her hands for a moment. They were steady. She had expected them to be shaking, and they weren't. She took that as information about something, though she wasn't entirely sure what. She did not tell Lily in advance. She had thought about this carefully and decided against it, because the gap between Saturday and now was too large a space for a 3-year-old to fill with anticipation or anxiety, and because she didn't want Lily to feel the weight of the moment before she was inside it. Instead, on Saturday morning, she told Lily they were going to the duck pond, and Lily's response was to immediately begin locating her shoes with the urgent purpose of someone who has received excellent news and intends to act on it immediately. "Do we have bread?" Lily asked. "The ducks don't need bread, Bug. It's not good for them." Lily processed this. "What do they need?" "They mostly need to exist and be ducks." "Can we watch them exist?" "Yes, that's the plan." Lily found one shoe and then immediately forgot she was looking for the second and started telling her rabbit about the ducks. Naomi found the second shoe and put it on her daughter's foot while Lily was still mid-sentence, and they left the apartment at 9:45, Lily carrying her rabbit and narrating the duck situation to it the entire way to the bus stop. Greenwood Park was quiet at 10 on a Saturday morning. The spring had finally started to mean something in terms of temperature, and the grass was that particular shade of new green that only appeared for a few weeks before it deepened and settled into itself. The duck pond was near the east entrance, surrounded by a low wooden railing that children could lean against without falling over, and there were already 3 mallards visible on the water when Naomi and Lily arrived. Lily spotted the ducks from 20 yards away and made the sound she made when she was extremely pleased, which was not quite a word and not quite a squeal, but something between the two, and she broke into the half-run, half-lurch of a small person moving fast in rubber boots that were slightly too big. "Slowly," Naomi said. Lily slowed to a version of slow that still covered ground quickly. Naomi stayed a few steps behind and scanned the park. She saw Adrian before Lily did. He was standing near the bench on the east side of the pond, not at the railing, giving them space to arrive first. He was wearing a navy jacket and dark jeans, not dressed down in a way that felt calculated, just dressed like a person on a Saturday. He was watching Lily approach the duck pond with the expression of someone who had been anticipating a moment and was now inside it, and finding that anticipation had not adequately prepared him. Lily reached the railing and pressed herself against it, and stared at the ducks with total absorption. 3, she announced. 1, 2, 3. That's right. Are they friends? Probably. Ducks tend to stay together. That one is bigger, Lily said, pointing at the mallard in the middle. He's the dad. Naomi felt something catch in her chest at the word and managed not to let it reach her face. Maybe, she said. She heard Adrian's footsteps on the path behind her, unhurried, giving her time to decide how to handle the next 30 seconds. She turned. He stopped about 6 feet away. He looked at her first, a brief checking-in look that she read correctly as, "Is this okay?" and answered with a small nod. Then he looked at Lily, who was still entirely focused on the ducks and had not yet registered the addition of a new person to her radius. "Lily," Naomi said. Lily turned around. She looked at Adrian with the direct, assessing look she gave to all new things. Not unfriendly, just evaluating. "This is Adrian," Naomi said. "He's someone Mama knows." Lily looked at him for another moment. "Do you like ducks?" she asked. Adrian crouched down so he was closer to her height. It was a careful, deliberate movement, not smooth. The movement of someone who didn't regularly crouch down and was thinking about it while doing it. "I don't know them very well," he said. "How many are there?" "3, Lily said. "The big one is probably the dad." "Probably," he agreed. "We can't give them bread," Lily said. "It's not good for them. They need to exist." "That makes sense," Adrian said. Lily looked at him with the expression she used when she was deciding whether someone was worth further investment. Then she turned back to the ducks, apparently having reached a provisional conclusion that he was acceptable. Naomi exhaled very quietly. They stayed at the pond for 40 minutes. Lily provided ongoing commentary on the ducks' movements, their apparent relationships, and her theories about what they were doing and why. Adrian listened to all of it with the specific quality of attention that was not performed. He was not doing the thing adults sometimes did with small children, where they made the listening face while thinking about something else. He was actually listening, following the thread of Lily's observations, asking questions when she paused long enough for one. "Why does that one keep going under?" he asked. "Eating," Lily said with authority. "There's food at the bottom." "What kind of food?" "Duck food," Lily said, in the tone she used when someone had asked a question with an obvious answer. "Right," Adrian said. "Of course." Naomi sat on the bench and watched them both and felt the particular complexity of a moment that contained too many things to name cleanly. Gratitude and caution and grief and something tentative that she didn't want to press on too hard because she didn't yet know if it would hold. At one point, Lily dropped her rabbit near the railing and didn't notice, and Adrian picked it up before Naomi could get to it and held it out to Lily without comment. Lily took it, looked at it, then looked at Adrian. "This is Rabbit," she said. "I can see that," he said. "She comes everywhere." "She seems like a good traveler." Lily appeared to find this the correct response and tucked the rabbit back under her arm and returned to the ducks. Naomi watched Adrian's face in the moment after. He wasn't performing anything. There was no calculated warmth, no conscious effort to score points. He just looked like someone who had been handed something they had not expected to be allowed to hold, and was being careful not to drop it. Besset. When the hour was up, Naomi told Lily it was time to go. Lily objected on the grounds that the ducks hadn't finished yet, and Naomi said the ducks would be there next time. And Lily considered the promise of a next time sufficient and began gathering her rabbit. Adrian walked them to the park entrance. At the gate he stopped, because this was where it ended, and he knew it. He looked at Lily. "It was nice to meet you," he said. Lily looked up at him. "You can come see the ducks again," she said. "There'll still be 3. "I'll remember that," he said. Lily nodded seriously and turned and walked out through the gate, already telling the rabbit about the duck situation in detail. Naomi followed, then stopped just outside the gate and turned back. Adrian was still standing there. "She's—" he started. He stopped. He looked like someone who had prepared a sentence and found, at the moment of delivery, that it wasn't adequate. "She's remarkable," he said finally. It was not an original thing to say. It was also true. "I know," Naomi said. She walked out to where Lily was waiting on the sidewalk, rabbit held up to witness the bus approaching in the distance, its arrival announced with significant enthusiasm. She did not look back at the gate. She didn't need to. She had seen what she needed to see. May arrived, and with it, carefully and without declaration, a new arrangement. Not formal, not scheduled with the density of a custody agreement or the stiffness of supervised visits, just occasional Saturday mornings, always at Naomi's choosing, always in places Lily already liked. The duck pond twice more. A children's museum on a rainy Saturday when Lily had declared the apartment too small for her current energy levels. A farmer's market where Lily became deeply invested in a stand selling wooden toys, and Adrian, without fanfare, bought her a small carved duck that she carried for the rest of the morning with the reverence of a person transporting something fragile and important. Naomi watched all of it. She watched the way he moved around Lily, consistently giving her space to come to him rather than pursuing her attention. She watched the way he handled Lily's tangents and non sequiturs and abrupt subject changes, which were frequent and required a particular flexibility of attention that not all adults managed. She watched the way he looked at Lily when Lily wasn't looking at him, the expression he wore in those unguarded seconds, which was something she didn't have a single word for but which she recognized as genuine. She also watched the way he was with her, with Naomi. He didn't push there either. He had taken everything she'd said at the coffee shop, all of it, every condition, and applied it without complaint and without the quietly resentful compliance of someone waiting for the rules to change. He was present when she allowed it and absent when she needed it to be, and he did not make her feel that either was a burden. This was not the Adrian she had known, or it was a version of him that had not been accessible before, and she wasn't entirely sure how to hold that distinction, whether people could genuinely change, or whether they could only uncover things that had always been there and been buried under years of choices that went in the wrong direction. She brought this question to Dr. Yoon, the clinic's new part-time psychiatrist, not as a professional consultation, but as a human being in her orbit, asking a question over coffee in the break room one Thursday afternoon. Dr. Yoon was 45, Korean-American, with a dry humor and no tolerance for vague language. She listened to Naomi describe the situation in broad strokes, no names, no specifics, and then said, "You're asking if change is real or if it's just behavior modification dressed up as character." Something like that. The honest answer is that we can't know from observation alone. We can only know from sustained behavior over time under conditions of genuine pressure. Dr. Yoon refilled her coffee cup. The question isn't whether someone has changed. The question is what they do when it costs them something. Naomi thought about that on the bus ride home. She thought about it in the quiet of the apartment after Lily was asleep. She thought about it the following Saturday morning when Adrian arrived at the farmer's market and Lily ran toward the toy stand and he followed her without looking at Naomi first for permission, which he would have done 3 months ago. He was learning her daughter. He was doing it quietly and without demanding that it be noticed, which was itself something worth noticing. Yet, the call came on a Wednesday evening in late June. Naomi was at the clinic doing late paperwork when her phone buzzed and she saw Lily's daycare number and picked up immediately. The automatic alertness of a parent who knows that a daycare calling at 6 in the evening is not a routine call. The director's voice was careful. "We've been trying to reach you. Lily had a fall this afternoon during outdoor play. She hit her head and we have her settled, but she's been crying and she's very warm. We'd like you to come as soon as you can." Naomi was already standing. "I'm on my way." She grabbed her bag and was out of the clinic before she'd finished processing the sequence of things she needed to do, running the route calculation in her head. Bus would take 22 minutes, a cab maybe 12. She pulled out her phone to call a cab and then stopped on the sidewalk outside the clinic because her hands were doing something she hadn't expected, which was shaking. She called the cab and then, without fully deciding to, called Adrian. He picked up on the second ring. "Naomi." "Lily's hurt. Daycare called. She fell and hit her head and she has a fever. I'm going there now." She heard her own voice, tighter than she intended, faster. "I don't know why I'm calling you. I'm closer to the daycare than you are," he said. His voice was even and immediate. "Give me the address. I'll go there now." She gave it to him. She didn't think about whether it was the right decision. She got in the cab that pulled up and gave the address and sat in the back seat and told herself that Lily was fine, children hit their heads. A fever didn't necessarily mean anything. Children ran fevers all the time. She told herself this and felt none of it. She arrived at the daycare 11 minutes later. The director met her at the door and led her to the quiet room at the back, where Lily was sitting on a small couch with a cold pack against the side of her head, eyes red from crying, clutching her rabbit, which the staff had retrieved from her cubby. She looked up when Naomi came in, and immediately began crying again with the particular relief of a child who has been holding it together and has now been given permission to let go. Naomi crossed the room and gathered her up and held her, and didn't say anything for a moment. Just let Lily cry into her shoulder while she ran her hand over her daughter's head, feeling for the injury. A swollen patch above her left ear, tender but not catastrophically so, and assessed her temperature with the automatic precision of someone who worked in medical settings and was using every bit of that knowledge right now to stay calm. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey, I've got you. I'm here." "I fell," Lily said into her shoulder. "I know. The teacher told me. It hurt a lot." "I know it did." "Rabbit was inside," Lily said, with a grief that encompassed the entire situation. "Rabbit is here now." Lily pulled back and looked at her with the serious, slightly glassy eyes of a child with a fever. "I want to go home. We're going to go to the doctor first, just to make sure your head is okay." "Is my head broken?" "No, we're just going to check." She kept her voice level. "You're not broken, Bug." Adrian was in the front room of the daycare when Naomi came out carrying Lily. He had arrived before her. She registered this without fully processing it, and he was standing near the door, still in the jacket he'd presumably been wearing when she called, and when he saw them come out he straightened but didn't move forward. Lily saw him. She processed him for a moment through the blur of her current misery, and then said, "Adrian?" in the low, tired voice of a sick child identifying someone familiar enough to acknowledge. It was the first time she had used his name unprompted. Something moved across Adrian's face, quick and unguarded, and gone before it fully formed. He moved then, crossing the room, not to Lily, but to Naomi. "My car is out front. I can drive you." Naomi looked at him. She looked at her daughter. She thought about the cab waiting, about the hospital being 15 minutes away and every minute of the drive mattering, about the fact that she was holding Lily, and her hands were still not entirely steady, and there was a car with a driver already here. "Okay," she said. They were in the car within 2 minutes. Lily rode in Naomi's lap in the back seat, still warm, slightly quieter now, one hand wrapped around her rabbit and the other curled in Naomi's coat. Adrian drove. He didn't talk. He knew the route. At one point Lily said, "My head still hurts." "I know," Naomi said. "Are we almost there?" "Almost." A pause. Then Lily reached out her free hand, not toward Naomi, but toward the space between the front seats, in the direction of Adrian. It was not intentional. She was 3 and feverish, and reaching toward warmth and proximity the way small children do when they are frightened. But Adrian took her hand without hesitation, not making it a thing, just holding it lightly, and Lily settled. Naomi watched this in the rearview mirror of her own awareness and felt something shift that she couldn't undo. The hospital was children's medical, and the emergency intake was the controlled chaos it always was on a Wednesday evening. Naomi went through triage with the focused efficiency of someone who knew the system from both sides, answered every question accurately, maintained the particular quality of calm she could produce on demand because her daughter needed her to, and that was that. They were seen within 40 minutes. The doctor, a young woman with a measured voice and a manner that communicated competence without condescension, examined Lily's head, ordered an X-ray to rule out anything structural, checked her eyes, asked her questions that Lily answered with the careful precision of someone who was taking the assessment seriously. "How old are you?" the doctor asked. 3, Lily said. "Almost 3.5. "And what's your rabbit's name?" Lily looked at the rabbit. She had been asked this before and had never given a definitive answer, which was in itself consistent with her personality. "Rabbit," she said, after consideration. "Good name," the doctor said. "I know," Lily said. The X-ray showed nothing structural. The fever was being monitored. The diagnosis was a minor concussion and a viral fever that had probably been coming regardless of the fall. A coincidence of bad timing, rather than a single event with a single cause. The doctor said to watch her overnight, to come back if anything changed, and that the headache would likely be gone within 48 hours. Naomi sat in the plastic chair beside Lily's bed and held her daughter's hand and felt the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright for the past 2 hours begin to drain, slowly, leaving behind the particular exhaustion that only comes when something frightening is over and your body has been given permission to acknowledge how frightened it was. Adrian had been in the waiting room the entire time. She had told him he didn't have to stay, and he had said he'd stay, and she hadn't argued because she hadn't had the bandwidth. When the doctor cleared them to go home, Naomi came out to the waiting room and found him exactly where she'd left him, sitting in one of the plastic chairs with his elbows on his knees and his coat folded over the seat beside him. He looked up when she came in. "She's okay," Naomi said. He let out a breath. Not dramatically, just a small, quiet release. The involuntary kind. The kind a body makes when it has been holding something and the reason to hold it is gone. She saw it and knew it for what it was, which was not a performance of relief, but the actual thing. He had sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and not known if his daughter was all right, and she could see exactly what those 2 hours had cost him. "Minor concussion," she said. "Fever's unrelated. She needs rest and monitoring overnight." He nodded. He picked up his coat. He stood up. He looked like he was going to say something and then decided against it, which she also recognized. The discipline of knowing that this moment belonged to her and Lily and not to him, and respecting that. "I'll get the car," he said. He got the car. He drove them home. Lily fell asleep in the back seat 5 minutes into the drive, her rabbit tucked under her chin, her breathing still slightly warm, but even. Adrian drove without music and without talking, and Naomi sat in the back with Lily and watched the city go by in the dark. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was holding everything up by herself. That feeling frightened her more than almost anything else had. Outside her building, she woke Lily gently and carried her, half asleep, up the stairs. At the door, she turned around. Adrian was at the bottom of the stairs with his hands in his coat pockets, having carried the bag she'd been juggling without being asked. "Thank you," she said. "Don't," he said. Not unkindly, just, "Don't make this a transaction." She understood. She looked at him in the late June night, the porch light making a small, warm circle at the top of the stairs. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had spent 2 hours in a waiting room not knowing, and it had done something to him. "She said your name," Naomi said, "at the daycare, when she saw you." He looked up. "That matters," she said. "I want you to know it matters." He nodded once. He didn't push it further. He put the bag at the top of the stairs and said goodnight and walked back to the car. She watched him go for a moment, then turned and took Lily inside. Bump! The overnight was long. Lily woke at 2 with her head hurting and wanted water and wanted to know if she could watch cartoons, and Naomi said yes to the water and no to the cartoons, and Lily accepted this with the resignation of someone who had suspected the answer but felt she had to try. At 3:15, Lily was asleep again, and Naomi was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her breathe in the nightlight's dim glow. And she thought about the car ride, about the small hand reaching into the front seat, about the lack of hesitation. She thought about what Dr. Yoon had said. The question is what they do when it costs them something. She thought about a man sitting in a plastic waiting room chair for 2 hours alone, not knowing. She thought about the breath he'd let out when she said she's okay. She was not ready to call it anything. She was not going to rush toward a conclusion that deserved more time. But she acknowledged to herself, in the quiet of 3 in the morning, with her daughter breathing steadily beside her, that something had moved, that the thing she'd been watching for, not a gesture, not a speech, not an argument, but a moment of genuine cost and genuine presence, had happened. She had seen it. She reached over and adjusted the blanket around Lily's shoulders, and Lily didn't wake, just shifted slightly, pulling the rabbit closer. "You're okay," Naomi said quietly to her daughter, to the room, to whatever was listening. She sat there until she was certain, and then she went to bed. In the morning, Lily's fever had broken, and she woke up with opinions about breakfast and strong feelings about which cartoon was appropriate for a person in recovery, and the apartment was full of her voice again, which was the only measure of okay that Naomi needed. She made pancakes. No blueberries this time. She had strawberries, finally, the first good ones of the season, and she sliced them and put them on the plate and set it in front of Lily, who looked at them with the profound satisfaction of someone whose faith in the universe has been vindicated. "Strawberries," Lily said. "Strawberries," Naomi confirmed. "I like strawberries better than blueberries." "I know you do." "But blueberries are okay," Lily added, fairly. Naomi sat down across from her and watched her eat and felt the morning come in through the kitchen window, ordinary and steady and sufficient, the way mornings had a habit of being when you let them. Her phone was on the counter. She looked at it once. She thought about the message she would send later. Not now, not while the pancakes were warm and Lily was narrating the strawberry situation to her rabbit, but later. Something simple. Something true. Something that didn't promise more than she was ready to give, but didn't withhold what was already real. She would find the words. She always had. For now there were strawberries and her daughter's voice and the particular quality of a summer morning in Seattle when the sun came through the clouds unexpectedly. And all of it was enough. The message she sent him the morning after the hospital was 7 words. She's asking if you're coming to the park. She had written longer versions. She had written a careful version that explained her thinking, a measured version that included conditions, a version that acknowledged the previous night without overstating what it meant. She had deleted all of them. 7 words was what was true, and everything else was scaffolding around the truth to make it feel safer, and she had decided she was done building scaffolding. He replied in 4. What time should I come? She told him 10. He was there at 9:55, which she filed as information about the kind of man who, when given a time, arrives before it because he doesn't want to be the reason something starts late. Lily was already at the duck pond when he got there, crouched at the railing in her yellow boots, conducting what appeared to be a serious one-sided conversation with the largest mallard. She heard his footsteps and turned around and said, "There are 4 now," with the urgency of someone reporting a significant development. 4 ducks? Adrian said. 4. 1 more than last time. She held up 4 fingers for confirmation. I think she had a baby. Which one? Lily pointed. That one. She looks tired. Adrian crouched down beside her and looked at the duck in question. She does look a little tired, he said. Babies are a lot of work, Lily said, with the authority of someone who had absorbed this information from the adults around her. They really are, he said. Naomi stood back and watched the 2 of them at the railing, the man and the small girl in yellow boots, and felt the ordinary, enormous weight of the moment. Not joy exactly. It was more complicated than joy. It was the feeling of standing at the end of a very long road and discovering that the ground under your feet was solid. The summer moved differently after that. Not faster, not slower. Differently. The way a room feels different when something heavy has been moved, even if you can't immediately identify what changed or where it went. The Saturday mornings became a rhythm rather than a negotiation. Adrian arrived at 10 and left when Lily's energy flagged, which was usually early afternoon, and he had learned, she could see him learning it in real time, the particular art of following a 3-year-old's lead rather than imposing structure on it. Some mornings they went to the park. Some mornings it rained and they stayed in the apartment, and Lily insisted on showing him things. Her dinosaur books, her carved wooden duck, the stacking cups that had been at the clinic that first day and had traveled with her ever since. He looked at all of it with the same quality of attention she'd noticed from the beginning. Not performed interest, just actual interest, which was something that could not be faked to a 3-year-old because 3-year-olds had no patience for the fake version and would immediately redirect their attention to something else. He was also, she noticed, learning how to be in the apartment. The first few times he'd stood slightly apart from things, careful about where he was and how much space he took up, conscious of being a guest in a life he had no claim to. By July, he knew where the cups were and would get Lily water when she asked without waiting for Naomi to do it. By August, he knew that the blue cup was the acceptable cup and the green cup was tolerated and the orange cup was currently out of favor for reasons Lily had not fully articulated but felt strongly about. These were small things. She knew they were small things. She also knew that small things were what a life was actually made of, and that anyone could show up for the large moments, the hospital nights, and the crisis calls. The question was always, who showed up for a Tuesday morning when nothing in particular was happening? He showed up for those too. She told Dana in August, over takeout at Naomi's kitchen table after Lily was asleep, and Dana listened to the whole account. The hospital, the 7-word message, the summer of Saturday mornings, with the focused attention she reserved for information she considered important. When Naomi finished, Dana ate a forkful of noodles and said, "How do you feel?" Confused, Naomi said. Careful. Something else I don't have a word for. Something good? Something real, which I've learned is not always the same as good, but is better than most of the alternatives. Dana was quiet for a moment. She was not a quiet person by nature, and the quality of her silences was always meaningful. Do you trust him? She asked. Naomi thought about this with the honesty it deserved. I trust what he's done. I trust the pattern. I don't trust the idea of him. I'm not building a story about who he is that's separate from his actual behavior. I'm watching what he does and I'm using that. She paused. That's not the same as trusting him completely, but it's real. And I think real is where I'm starting from. Dana pointed her fork at her. That's the most grown-up thing I've ever heard you say. I've been grown up the whole time. You have, Dana agreed. I just think you get more specifically grown up every time something hard happens to you and you handle it anyway. She went back to her noodles. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Not because he deserves it, because Lily deserves it, and because you deserve not to carry everything alone anymore. Naomi looked at her plate. I didn't do it to stop carrying things alone. I know, that's why it's working. In September, on a rainy afternoon when the early fall had settled into the city with its usual permanence, Naomi asked Adrian to stay for dinner. She said it without building up to it and without qualifying it afterward. She had made pasta, the same pasta she'd made the night Lily asked about her father for the first time, which she noticed and chose not to mention. And Lily had made the executive decision that there was enough for 3, which Naomi had decided to honor. Adrian sat at the kitchen table across from Lily, who had arranged the table with the precision of a person with strong opinions about place settings, and they ate pasta, and Lily talked about her new daycare teacher, Ms. Fern, who had a way of saying that's interesting whenever someone told her something, which Lily had decided was a quality worth imitating. Ms. Fern says that's interesting about everything, Lily explained to Adrian. Is it a real that's interesting or a pretend one? He asked. Lily considered this seriously. Real, she said. She does this thing with her face when she means it. Lily demonstrated a face that was entirely her own interpretation of genuine interest, eyebrows raised, eyes widened. Like that? Adrian said. Yes, Lily confirmed, but a little less. Yours is better, he said. Lily looked pleased and went back to her pasta. Naomi watched them and thought about a conversation she'd had with her mother the week before. Carol had called on a Sunday, and they'd talked for an hour, which was longer than their usual calls. And somewhere in the middle of it, Carol had said quietly, without preamble, Are you happy, Naomi? Not content, not managing. Are you actually happy? She had paused before answering, not because the question was hard, but because she wanted the answer to be accurate. Most days, she'd said, more than before. Is that because of him? No, she'd said. It's because of what I built. He's part of the days now. But it's what I built that makes the days worth being part of. Her mother had been quiet for a moment. That's a good answer, she'd said. I know, Naomi had said. Don't tell Dana I agreed with you. She'll never let me hear the end of it. Hold on. The conversation she'd been postponing happened on a Friday evening in October, the week before Lily's 4th birthday, when Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet and Adrian was still at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold while they talked about something she couldn't remember 20 minutes later because of what came after it. She looked at him across the table and said, I need to ask you something. He put down the cup. What happened to you? She said. That night, in the penthouse. I don't mean what you said. I understand what you said. I mean what was happening in you that made you say it like that. She kept her voice even. I've thought about it for 4 years. I have my own theory, but I want to hear yours. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, I was afraid. Of a baby? A failing one. He looked at his hands on the table, then up at her. My father was a man who believed that emotional attachment was a liability. I don't mean he said it out loud. He just lived it Every decision he made, every relationship he had, it was all about not being dependent on anything that could be taken from you. He paused. I watched him my whole childhood, and I thought he was cold, and I thought I was different. And then the moment it was tested, I said exactly what he would have said. Naomi looked at him. That's not the whole answer. No, he agreed. The rest of it is that I had built something and I didn't want anything to change it. I didn't want... He stopped, started again. I told myself I didn't want children because I had never wanted to want things I might lose. And then you walked in that door and told me there was going to be a person, a specific person, and I was going to love her and I was going to be terrified every day of failing her. And instead of feeling any of that, I just shut it. He met her eyes. I shut the whole thing down and I called it a decision. The kitchen was very quiet. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me, she said. I know, I've been practicing. A pause. My therapist would like a review of her work. Naomi looked at him for a moment and felt, in spite of herself, the corner of her mouth move. It's not funny, she said. It's a little funny. It's not. The timing of the joke was wrong, he said. I understand. The timing was terrible. You almost smiled. I did not. He looked at her steadily. Naomi, I know I don't get to ask for anything. I know what I forfeited, and I'm not pretending otherwise. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to give me an honest answer, not the measured one, the actual one. She waited. Do you think this can be something? He didn't gesture broadly. He kept it specific, kept it real. Not perfect, not repaired, just something that actually is what it is, between two people who have been completely honest with each other about the worst versions of themselves. She sat with the question. She gave it the time it deserved. I think it's already something, she said. I don't know what to call it. I don't know where it goes. But it's not nothing, and it stopped being nothing a while ago, and I'm not going to pretend that isn't true. He nodded once. He didn't push further. He picked up the cold coffee and drank it anyway, which was such a specific, unglamorous human thing to do that she found herself thinking about it later, after he'd left, as the thing that stayed with her. Not the conversation, not the honesty, but the cold coffee. People were so much more themselves in the small things. Lily's 4th birthday was a Saturday. Naomi's mother came, and Dana came, and the 2 daycare friends came with their parents, and the apartment was the particular kind of full that small spaces become when they contain the right people. Loud and warm and slightly chaotic in the way that is indistinguishable from joy when you're inside it. Adrian came too. This was new. He had not been to anything that included Carol and Dana before, and the first 10 minutes of his arrival had the careful quality of a new element being introduced into an established compound, everyone managing their own reactions with varying degrees of subtlety. Dana's was the least subtle. She gave him the kind of look that communicated an entire history of having heard about him, then turned to Naomi and said, "He's taller than I expected," which was not really about height. Carol shook his hand and said, "It's good to meet you," in the tone she used when she meant, "I'm watching you," which he appeared to understand because he said, "It's good to meet you too, and I imagine you have a lot of things you could say to me right now." Carol looked at him for a moment. "I have a few," she said. "Whenever you want to," he said. Carol nodded in a way that meant the conversation was not closed, but was being deferred in the interest of the birthday party, and that was apparently sufficient for now. Lily was unaware of all adult subtext and was focused entirely on the fact that there was a cake with her name on it and 4 candles, and that the cake had been decorated with ducks, which she had requested specifically and which Dana had executed with impressive accuracy given her track record with baked goods. 4 ducks, Lily said, counting them. 1 for each year. That was the plan, Dana said. This one looks tired, Lily said, pointing at the 4th duck. That one was the hardest to pipe, Dana said. Technically, she's just done a lot of swimming. Lily accepted this explanation and proceeded to the business of the party with great enthusiasm. She opened presents with the focused intensity of someone who understood that this was a moment of significance and intended to give it its due. She received books and a new dinosaur set and a stuffed animal from Mia that she immediately introduced to her existing rabbit, and from Adrian, a small wooden box with a brass clasp that opened to reveal a collection of watercolor paints. real ones, not children's paints, with a small instruction card tucked inside. Lily opened the box and looked at the colors for a long time. "These are the real kind," she said. "They are," Adrian said. "For real paintings. For whatever you want." Lily looked up at him with an expression Naomi recognized. It was the face she made when something had met an expectation she hadn't quite articulated, the face of a person whose interior standard had been matched. "Thank you, Adrian," she said, with the gravity of someone who means it completely. "Happy birthday, Lily," he said. Carol was watching this from across the room. When Naomi glanced at her, her mother looked away, which meant she was feeling something she was not going to let herself feel in a kitchen full of people. That was the most Naomi was going to get, and it was enough. After the guests left and the cake was mostly gone, and Lily was asleep in her room with both rabbits, the stuffed one and the new one from Mia, Naomi and Adrian cleaned up the kitchen while Carol sat at the table with a cup of tea, which meant Carol was not leaving yet and was making a decision about something. When the counter was cleared, Carol set down her cup and looked at Adrian and said, "I want to say something to you." He turned from the sink. "Okay." "I'm not going to list everything," she said. "I don't think that's useful, and I don't think it's what tonight is for. But I want you to know that I see what you've been doing this year, and I want you to know that it's not nothing." She looked at him steadily. "It's not forgiveness. I'm not there, and I may not get there, but it's not nothing." He met her eyes. "I understand." "She built this," Carol said. "Naomi, she built everything you're sitting in the middle of right now. The clinic, this apartment, that little girl in there. She built it with her own hands while you were somewhere else. I want to make sure you know that." "I know that," he said. "Good." Carol picked up her tea. "Then we understand each other." She left 20 minutes later, kissing Naomi on the cheek at the door and giving Adrian a nod that was not warm but was not hostile, which Naomi counted as significant progress for one evening. The apartment was quiet after she left. Naomi leaned against the counter and looked at Adrian across the kitchen. "She likes you," she said. "She absolutely does not like me. She respected you enough to say what she said to your face instead of to me behind your back. For my mother, that's the same as liking you." He considered this. "She's a good woman." "She's the reason I'm the person I am," Naomi said, "which means she's indirectly responsible for all of this, including the parts that were hard for everyone." He looked at her. "The parts that were hard—" He stopped. "I want to say something, and I want to say it correctly, so I'm going to take a second." She waited. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not as a transaction, not because it's the thing you're supposed to say. I'm sorry because what I did in that room 4 years ago was a failure of everything I should have been, and you lived with the consequence of it for 4 years alone. And Lily lived with it. And I spent those same 4 years not knowing what I was missing and thinking that not knowing was the same as not having lost anything." He looked at her steadily. "It wasn't. I lost 4 years with her. That's not something I can get back. I'm not asking you to make it better. I'm just asking you to know that I understand what it cost." She looked at him across the kitchen of the apartment she had found and furnished and lived in for 3 years, and the life she had built out of nothing but stubbornness and love and the refusal to lie down on a wet sidewalk. "I know you understand it," she said. "That's why we're here." She said it simply, without drama. It was just true, and the truth of it was enough to stand on. November came, and with it the thing that Naomi had not planned for, which was that the life they were building, without ever naming it, without a conversation where they decided it was a thing they were doing, had become undeniable to everyone, including herself. Adrian was there. Not all the time, not in the way of someone who had moved the furniture and claimed the space, but consistently, reliably, in the way that mattered. The Saturday mornings, the occasional dinners, the Wednesday afternoon when Lily's daycare called because she'd had a hard day, and Naomi was in the middle of something at the clinic, and he went and got her, just went and got her, and brought her home and waited until Naomi arrived and then left. Lily had stopped introducing him to people as someone Mama knows and had started introducing him as my dad, which she had begun doing in early October without announcement or ceremony, the way children absorb and apply information, simply because it was the word that fit. The first time Naomi heard it, at the farmer's market, Lily explaining to a stranger who was admiring her carved duck that my dad got me this one. She had stood very still for a moment on the sidewalk. The stranger had said what a lovely gift, and Lily had moved on to the next stall, and Adrian had come to stand beside Naomi with the wooden duck stand's canvas bag in his hand, and had also been very still. "She just decided," Naomi said. "Yes," he said. "You didn't tell her to." "No." She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything else about it because there was nothing that needed saying. Lily had made the assessment on her own terms, on her own timeline, with the uncomplicated accuracy of a child who deals in what is actually true rather than what is formally designated. He was her dad. She'd decided. That was that. On a Sunday in late November, the three of them walked home from the duck pond together in the early afternoon light, the low, sideways winter light of Seattle that made everything look slightly warmer than it was, edges gilded, puddles shining. Lily walked between them holding both their hands, which she had begun doing without asking sometime in October, an arrangement she had invented and implemented unilaterally and which neither adult had objected to. She was talking about the ducks because she was almost always talking about the ducks. She had assigned all four of them names now: Henry, Margot, Steve, and the tired one, who she had named Patricia after Ms. Fern's co-teacher at daycare, whom she considered extremely capable. Patricia had more babies, Lily announced. More ducklings, Naomi said. Not yet, but she's going to. You can tell. How can you tell? Adrian asked. She swims differently, Lily said, as though this were obvious. Differently how? Lily considered how to explain it. Like she's carrying something, she said finally. Adrian was quiet for a moment. That's a good observation, he said. I know, Lily said. They walked on. The afternoon light stretched across the wet sidewalk in long gold lines. Lily swung their hands experimentally, and both adults accommodated the swing without being asked, which made her do it again, bigger, and then she was laughing at the swinging and at herself, and the sound of it went up into the gray November air, and Naomi felt it in her chest, that sound, the way she always felt it, like something that had been clenched releasing, like the specific warmth of a thing that is both ordinary and irreplaceable. She thought about this woman she had been 4 years ago, on a wet sidewalk with nowhere to go but the bus stop. She thought about what that woman had known, and what she hadn't, and what she had lost, and what she had built, and whether any of it had gone the way she would have planned it if she had been given the option of planning. It hadn't. Almost none of it had. The clinic, the years alone, the Saturday mornings at the duck pond, the cold coffee, the 7-word text message, the birthday ducks. None of it was the story she would have written for herself at 28, standing in a rain-soaked doorway, bracing herself for a conversation she didn't know was going to break something open. But here was the thing about the story she hadn't planned. It had made her exactly the person she needed to be. Every hard year had built something in her that the easy version wouldn't have. The patience she had, the clarity, the knowledge of what she could carry and what she chose to put down. None of that came from things going well. It came from things going wrong and choosing every single time to keep going anyway. She was not grateful for the pain. She was not the kind of person who looked back at hard things and called them gifts. Pain was pain. Loss was loss. What Adrian had done in that penthouse had cost her in ways she would probably still be finding the edges of for years. But what she had built inside the loss, that was hers. Fully, undeniably hers. And it had turned out to be worth more than anything she'd given up. She looked down at Lily, who had stopped swinging and was now walking with great purpose, explaining to both of them the trajectory of Patricia's life and the challenges and rewards of duck motherhood, which she appeared to have thought about in some depth. She looked across at Adrian, who was listening to this with his full attention, asking the occasional question, occasionally catching Naomi's eye over Lily's head with an expression that was not a performance of happiness, but the actual thing, unguarded, real. The expression of a man who knows exactly how close he came to never having this and is choosing, every single day, not to forget it. That was all she had asked of him. That was all she had ever asked of anyone. Not perfection, not a clean slate. Just the willingness to be present and honest and accountable, day after day, in the ordinary light. He was doing it. She was watching. And the life they were all three walking home through, imperfect, interrupted, built on the unsteady ground of what had been broken and chosen and broken again and rebuilt, was the most real thing she had ever been inside. Patricia is going to be fine, Lily announced, concluding her assessment with authority. I believe you, Naomi said. Me too, Adrian said. Lily nodded, satisfied, and swung their hands one more time, and they walked the rest of the way home in the low November light, all three of them, without needing to say anything else. Some things don't need to be named to be true. The people who are paying attention already know.